everybody. Welcome to the first lesson in our Learning Stitches online course. So let's get on with it. I know that a lot of you are still waiting on materials because we've had a whole lot of people jump in here in the last couple weeks. We are shipping out as quick as we can. We have plenty of banding and we're sending that out to you. And you'll notice that sometimes the banding sells out online. That's because I'm trying to make sure I don't oversell any one particular one. So if that happens, check back in a day or so or shoot me an email and I will take a look at that and we'll reset it and add some more to it. You know, as fate would have it, it sounds like they're outside with some kind of leaf blower or something. So we'll have to put up with that for the next 5 minutes or so. It's life in a small town. This is the real world of cross stitch. Something like that, I guess. I think somebody already has that title. This is the real world of Sassy Jacks. We'll call it that. So, there is the book, this book, Learning Stitches Sampler with Jeanette Douglas Designs. It is a relatively expensive book, but I mean, it is a book, and it is a very good book. Jeanette did a fabulous job with this book. So those of you that have it, I hope you appreciate it. You're going to use it in this course. In the back of it, it has a really beautiful sampler that Jeanette designed with the stitches that she included in the book, and you may decide you want to do that at the end. We're not going to do that as we stitch, but you will have the skills to do it at the end. And Jeanette's also included in here, you know, some little tips and tricks, which I think is great. Her diagrams are excellent. So you'll notice in the book, if you have the book, that she does refer to thread colors, and that's because she's giving you the thread colors that she used in the sampler. So you can certainly do that, but what I would encourage you to do, because you're really just going to be stitching on a piece of banding, this is the 21 count banding. So 20, 21 count, depends on how they come off the loom, how the loom was set up. This is what I'm going to demo on. I'll actually do my other piece on a piece of the 28 count. But this is what I'm going to demo on because the holes are big, and when I put the camera on it, I think you'll be able to see it. So you're just going to be stitching on a banding. Most of you have a yard. Some of you, if you're on this higher count, the 21 count, you might have a yard and a half. At some point, we started giving you extra linen in there, and we priced it appropriately for that, although this stuff's pretty inexpensive. So, you know, I'm going to talk to you about how you're going to stitch this and how much spacing you need and all that good stuff. But you need a piece of banding. If you don't have a piece of banding, you should have a piece of linen that you're going to use. And I'll put some instructional video out there on a finishing edge stitch, like a hem stitch or an unstitch or something like that. So don't worry about that. Generally, I will say that most people would do that edge finishing stitch if you're on regular linen before you start. But we'll get you started, and you can just stitch down the edges and keep up with us. So you don't have to do the whole thing, right? Because you might not know exactly how long it's going to be. So if you're doing it on a regular piece of lining and not a piece of banding, then, you know, don't worry so much right now about doing the edging stitch. Make sure you give yourself enough room to do one. So give yourself, you know, at least 2 extra inches on each side, if not 3, but at least 2 on each side. And then you need about a yard in length. So you should be getting that. If you don't have the book, we did have to reorder the books a few times, but Jeanette's got another shipment coming to us. We should have it any day, and we'll be turning those right back around and getting them back out to you. You know, some people ask me if they could do it without the book. I'll leave that to you. You know, you can give it a try, but I really think you need the book. Now, having said that, you know, you're not paying a teaching fee, you're using stuff from supplies, your stash. You should be using threads. That's how we started out the conversation. You should be using your own threads from your own stash. Whatever you want, it doesn't really matter. Jeanette shows some color changes through here. You can do that if you want to, but really, you're just learning. So use something that's easy. If you've got a single strand, like a pearl number 12 or a sulky number 12, or a flower thread. I'm going to be demoing with flower thread from Vopal and Hollenbeck. So a single strand is easy if you're just learning to stitch on linen, or, you know, for these specialty stitches, it just makes it easier. So that's what we'll be using. I want to talk a little bit about this hoop. I know a lot of you kind of jumped in my boat with me and ordered this hoop because I love this hoop, and this is what I'll be demoing with most of the time. This is one of the smaller oval hoops from Hardwick Manor. They come from Access Commodities. I want you to notice on this hoop that it has a number on it. It has a marking on it. And I haven't really paid attention to see if they're all the same. But each one does have a number stamped on it. That's the way this hoop should fit together. So you will notice if you put this hoop together in another way, maybe like this, for example, where those numbers aren't together, it still goes together. But it's not a perfect fit. You can see a tiny little air hole there. It's a perfect fit if you put it the other way. And that is why these hoops are kind of expensive, because they are made, you know, very specifically. Maybe we can get Lamar to give us a little video or a little talk on how these rounded hoops are made. But these rounded hoops are definitely harder to make, and they do definitely have a perfect fit. And so that's what this number stamped on here is for. It's to show you exactly how it goes together. Now, once you wrap your hoop, which I haven't done that to this one yet, you won't be able to see that number. So at least not on the inner hoop. But it won't matter as much then, because you've got some additional traction on that inner hoop. If you got this hoop, you need the 3/8 inch twill tape for it. You could use something else, but I'm telling you the twill tape's the way to go on these rounded hoops, especially because it has a little stretch in it. So as you're wrapping that hoop, you can use that stretch to make sure you get a nice snug fit. So once you have the inner hoop wrapped, the fit on these is like drum tight. It's like nearly perfect. It won't really matter which way you turn it. But if you're using it unwrapped, you know, be conscious of that number and what it's really for. It's so that you have that perfect snug fit. You know, you won't need it once it's wrapped. So that's my spiel on the hoop. You can use anything. You don't have to use this hoop. You can stitch in hand. You can use a round hoop. You can use a Q-snap. I have all those, and I use all those. In fact, let's talk about the banding a little bit. So if you've got this 21 count banding, and in fact for everybody, I'm going to recommend that you actually don't stitch the whole block that's in the book. You know, you can do that. It's beautiful. That block is meant to fit inside the sampler at the back, and so that's why you have that full block. I would rather you, because this is a learning exercise, I would rather you have, you know, you need to leave enough room to do something with this banding. So you're probably going to put it on a spool or something like that, and we're still working on some options for you there. You won't need that till you get to the end. But at a minimum, you can roll it up. You know, but we'll try to get you some spools that you can put it on. So you want to have enough left over to wrap around the center of whatever you're going to, you know, attach it to. Now, if you don't, you can always deal with that. You can attach it to a piece of wool or something like that. But, you know, leave at least 2 inches at the top, if not 3, of where you start. And then we would want you, we're actually going to give you a little free design. So you should have it by now, actually. When you see this video, you will have it. It's super cute. And so we've given you an intro motif band and a finishing band. And the intro, of course, gives you the title of the course, and of course it has a squirrel. But it has something else that's pretty cool. It has a spool of thread with red thread on it. And red thread in samplers at a certain point in time was very hard to get. And sometimes in old samplers you'll just see like half a letter or 1 letter done in red. And that's because it was probably gifted to the stitcher by a good friend or a family member or something like that. Red thread was a gift a lot of times because it was valuable. And so the spool on our starting, you know, motif is going to have red thread on it. Now, you don't have to do that. You can do it in whatever color you want. But it is symbolic of a gift of friendship. So you want to skip some space up here. And you may want to go ahead and stitch your motif of your squirrel if you want to do it. It also has learning stitches on it. It's pretty cool. And then you can come down and you can start your first band. And I wouldn't skip a whole lot of space. You know, you want to be conservative with the banding. It's a learning thing, so you don't need a whole lot of white space. But, you know, skip a few threads between. Now, that's one thing I did want to talk about. When we talk about stitches on this, we're going to be talking about threads. And I mean threads. I don't mean boxes. I mean threads. And so when you start from your, if you're right-handed or left-handed, I think you're going to be starting on the left either way. But skip one thread on here. And I know that looks tight and that looks close, but you know, it's supposed to. Again, it's your learning example. So we will do, you know, each block that we do out of this book, I'll tell you how many repeats to do before you move on to the next block. So you won't be stitching that whole block. I think if you stitch the whole block, you would be getting pretty close to running out of room, or you might run out of room. And again, it's just for learning, for you to learn how to do the stitch. After you do 3 repeats of each of these stitches, and by 3 repeats, I mean at least 3 bands, and some of them will be 6, I think you'll have it. You know, if you decide you want more banding, you know, hit us up, no big deal. But, you know, just for documentation really is what this is for. When you get to the end, you will also have, we've prepared another chart for you, which is pretty neat. The bottom part really is an alphabet for you to put your name and stuff in there. So we've provided that as well. So don't worry about that. We've got all that down, and we think you'll like it. They're pretty little charts. Allie did it for me, so thank you, Allie, for doing that. You know, first step, everybody get their supplies. Think about whether or not you want to do your title motif, and then do this first band with me. And I will tell you, if you're watching this and, you know, this is a month on in or 2 months in, that's okay. You can do this thing at your own pace. All of the videos are going to be out there and available for people. You don't have to be in lockstep with us. You can pick this up at any time and do it. If you have questions for me, you can send them to me by email at sjsclasses with an S on it @gmail.com. So, and put in there in the title, you know, learning stitches, so that I know that it's about this class. So I'm going to break and go away from you, and then we're going to come back and we're going to do a little stitching together. So hang tight. Okay, welcome back. So you notice that I have a black cloth underneath my stitching. That helps the holes to kind of pop through. This flower thread that I'm using comes from Vopal and Hollenbeck. I know that a lot of you know that we are going to be going over there this week, which means we probably won't have a video next week for the next band. We might, if I can get it done and get it posted. But I will be in Germany buying other banding next weekend, so we're excited about that. So I am going to undo this huge long skein of flower thread. I'm not going to undo it all the way, just enough to get some fibers out for me to work with, and they are in long strands. I'm not going to use anything too long. So I actually got that, you know, a little bit longer than I wanted, but it's about the length of my arm. It's not very long, and I'm just going to use a single strand now. Jeanette talks about flowering the fiber in the book, and this is what she's talking about. You just pop the top of it like a little, like you're popping a little, I don't know, bunny foo-foo or whatever that song is. And you pull the flower thread out this way. I am going to go grab a needle. Okay. Because I didn't bring it. So, sorry about that. I'm back. So, you know, we usually send out needles with things that you buy, and if you don't have one from us, you know, try to find yourself a 24 needle, and we usually put them in a little piece of wool, so that's what that is. I'm going to show you this nifty trick that I use to thread the needle. You can use a needle threader if you need to, whatever works for you. I put it over the fat part of my finger, I lay the eye of the needle on it, and I just kind of rub it. And then it kind of pops through the eye a little bit, and I grab it and pull it through. Okay? Now, let's talk about starting. I'm not a quilter, so I don't know how to do that quilter's knot, but that would be a good knot to do. I think you just, almost like you're making a bullion stitch, you just wrap it around the eye and you poke it through. I usually just tie a knot, and if I think it needs to be a bigger knot, I tie 2, but I think that's where the quilter's knot kind of wins this war, is that you can just make a really huge knot with it. It's no big deal.
So there's a few different ways to start this out. I'm going to show you today. I'm going to show you the away knot or the waistway knot. So I just want to make it a little bit bigger because this is a really big count linen. I'm on the 21 count banding. An away knot means that it's in your line of stitching. And so you would just go from the top of the fabric down. A waistway knot means it's somewhere else. So if you are doing a stitch where you don't have like a good, line of stitching, then you can do an away knot. So you would just start it way down here, and then you would start stitching up here. When you're done, you would clip the knot off and run it underneath. And I think today I'm going to show you the away knot, waist away knot. It's called a waist away knot because you have wasted thread here, but you really don't, because you need to have where you start from where your knot is further enough away that you can thread the needle with it. And remember I said we were going to come in one thread. You're going to skip one thread from the edge. And you really want to be by a vertical thread, which means that you want your stitch to be starting in a hole that is beside a thread that is on top. And I will put a diagram out there that shows you a vertical thread. That just gives it more support. So on this first stitch though, you're going to have to count in a few threads. And if you look at your pattern on pages 6 and 7, page 6 shows you, to do the very first stitch, how many threads you need to come in order to have your stitch, the edge of your stitch end over there. And so you want to actually skip from where you would start, where you want the end to be, 4 threads. Okay, so you've skipped 1 thread for your border, and then you want to skip 4 threads. So I'm going to skip 1, 2, 3, 4. Still by a vertical thread, okay? Which means that thread that I'm on my right hand side of the needle is going over the thread that's underneath it. Okay, so that's where I'm going to start. And if I look at page 7, the stitch diagram, it shows stitch 1 coming up here and then going over 2 threads. So there's 1 thread, 2 thread, back down. All right, that's the first stitch. Okay, and you see how easy this single strand is? Now the next stitch, you drop down a thread. And that's kind of how I do all of my counting. I try to make sure, really sure, that I've got it lined up right to begin with. So you drop down a thread. And then you go over an extra thread. So the second stitch, instead of covering 2 threads, covers 4 threads. So you can count it too. So you started here, 1, 2, 3, 4. Or you're just going 1 extra thread beyond where you started. The third stitch, you drop down a thread. And you can count them. You should have 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you go down up there. Okay. And then you've got 3 stitches that same height. All right. So that's your first one. Your second one. You're not even having to count this one. And then your third one. All right. So that's your 3 stitches the same height. Then you're going to reduce. So now you're coming in a thread. So this one is going to cover 4 threads. 1, 2, 3, 4. Or, you're backing off a thread on each side. And the next one is going to cover 2 threads. So you're coming in a thread. You're covering 1, 2 threads. Okay. So that's your first little pod. Your first, little part of the Hungarian stitch. So now we're going to do a band of these across. To do the band, you need to skip a thread in between, 2 threads in between. So you've got 1 thread, 2 threads. You skip those 2 threads between, and you start your next stitch, and it's up at 1 and down at 2. It starts out the same way. Make sure you skip 2 threads, because if you don't, when you come to do these underneath going the other direction, they will not line up. Don't ask me how I know that, but you can see my ore jar here. So everybody makes a mistake. All right. So the first stitch was over 2 threads. The second stitch is over 4 threads. So you come down a thread and count 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? And you carry on this way. Okay? The next one's over 6 threads. So you come down 1 thread and you go over 6 threads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now you notice I'm always going in the same direction, bottom to top, on this particular band. All right? Now remember we had 3 fat legs in the middle, and you can look at your stitch diagram and get that. 3 long stitches, all over 6 threads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 threads, right? And then you're gonna dial it in a thread. This one's over 4 threads. 1, 2, 3, 4. This one's over 2 threads. That banding mean loose is driving me a little nuts there. But without having it wrapped, that's about as tight as I'm gonna get it. Okay? So that's the end of your second Hungarian stitch. Now remember, you have to skip 2 threads between these guys. If you don't, you'll have to take it out. It will not line up when you come to do the horizontal stitches. Okay, so the first one's over 2 threads. And you can look at your stitch diagram. The second one's over 4 threads. The third leg is over 6 threads, and you can count those little threads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 threads. And then you've got 2 more legs that same size. Okay. And you come in 1 thread. This one goes over 4. Then the last leg of this Hungarian stitch goes over 2. So you come in a thread, 1, 2. Okay, there's your third Hungarian. All right. I'm going to continue this way till I get to the end, and then I'm going to come back to you and I'm going to show you what I do there at the end. Okay. Okay, so we made it to the end, and you notice that we have more, more than one thread and less than the 4 that we started out at the other side. That's okay, because when we do the side stitch and we come back down here, I'm going to show you the compensating part of that. So we're ready to run this thread under. So when you've got a bunch of loose stitches like this, you never want to go under your very last leg, because it's the most fragile, because you just stitched it. So I usually go, it's hard to do with this hoop on here, but I usually kind of weave in and out of these stitches when they're really loose on the back like that. And that just gives it just a smidge more stability. And, because these are loose and because you are going to be using this as a teaching piece, you may choose to run it under more than what you would normally do. And that should be plenty. And so then I'm going to cut that off. All right. Now, you see on the back here, this is our away knot, our waistway knot. And now I'm going to run this under the stitches where I started. So you just pull the knot off the top, cut it, and then you want to thread your needle with that long strip you left on the back. So as you can see, the longer the leg you leave for that, the easier it is to thread that needle. You can use a threader if you need to. You can lick it if you need to. I don't like to do that, but so the same rule applies. This is the first leg. I don't want to go under that because I don't want to disturb that leg. I'm going to skip, because these are pretty loose stitches. I'm going to skip a couple and I'm just going to weave. And there's no science to this. You're just trying to secure the thread. Okay, so that's all you really need to worry about. All right. Okay, so that is your first band of Hungarian stitches completed. And you should be able to see that you've skipped threads between these guys, 2 threads between each stitch. That's going to allow you to fit your other stitches in there. Now I'm going to switch to a different color thread to do this next band so that we can see how they connect. And I am going to start with an away knot, not a waist away knot, but an away knot. It's going to go up here so that I can stitch right over it. Okay, so I'll be right back. Okay, so I am starting with an away knot this time, which means it's going to sit right in my line of stitching. And if you look at your stitch diagram, you'll see on page 6, you can see the second band. It's kind of hard to pull it out in there, but you'll see that they sit horizontally instead of vertically. If you look at page 7 and you look kind of in the middle, you can see that you start the first stitch where you started the first stitch of the first band, right? And it goes the same way. It's just that you're going horizontally instead of vertically. So you start right there, you count over 2 threads, and you go down. Okay? That's the first leg. And then you'll remember the second leg is 4 threads wide. So you're going to come out a thread, which lines you up with the second leg of the stitch above. And you count threads, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you go back down, right? Is that making sense? Just practice it. Try not to visualize it. It might be a little hard, but, just count it. So you're going to come out a thread to start the third leg, and you're going to cover 6 threads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you go back down. Now, that puts you exactly where you wanted to be when we started. Remember we counted over 4 threads? Because we wanted to have a 1 thread margin before we got to the edge of the banding. And that's exactly what happened. Now you remember that the next 2 legs are the same length. They're both over 6 threads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. And you've got one more like that. That's 3. Now you start to come back in a thread. The next thread is over 4 stitches. So you come in a thread and you count over 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're down. Okay? The next one's over only 2 threads. So you come in And you count over 1, 2, which is in a thread from the one you just did, and you're down. Okay, so that's a completed Hungarian stitch. And you can see if you pull them really tight when you're doing this, you're going to distort them. So you want to have good tension, and that's what a part of this practice piece is, but you don't want to pull too tight. And as you do this more, it'll look more consistent, so don't be too worried about it. So that's how this band is going to look. They're going to lay in here just like that, and we're going to stitch over this thread. So this is a band of Hungarian stitches that are all going to be going horizontally and lining up here. Now, I could start right here and do the next vertical one. And if you were, stitching in a whole section, you might do that. But we're going to do this in bands first, and then we'll practice it, where you're actually doing an area. So that means that I need to travel. And I'm not going to end this thread and start over, right? You can, if you want to. I'm not going to. And you may want to watch how we do it when we are doing a little section and we're doing kind of all of the 4 little pods together. And that way you might not feel like you have to travel or end a thread. But for purposes of this, I'm going to travel. And I'm going to just go back up. Remember, I'm going to skip that first leg because it's a little fragile. I'm going to go back up through there, and my away thread's in my way a little bit, and I'm going to then travel underneath these guys there to get back to where I want to start. Now, again, I don't travel like this when I'm doing something fancy, but this is a demo and we're learning, and it'll take a long, long time if I start and stop and start every thread, and it won't look any better on the back doing that in this case. Okay, so now we are up here, and I'm going to start here at this side of this leg, it's the last leg, and I'm going to come over 2 threads. Okay? So this is basically going to connect those 2 little pods. So that one went over 2 threads. Now I'm going to come out a thread. This one's going to go over 4 threads. 1, 2, 3, 4, and down. Right? And you just want to keep going in the same direction. I mean, I really could have went right to left, but I wanted to go left to right. Now I'm going to come out 1 thread. I'm going to travel over 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 threads. And see how they're lining up with the row that we did before. Right? Now the next 2 legs are the same width. They both go over 6 threads so that you have 3 in the middle, all over 6 threads. Right? Now we decrease the size by 1 thread. That one goes over 4 threads, just like before. And then the last leg of the stitch goes over 2 threads. Okay? So, now you have your second pod on this band. Your second Hungarian stitch is completed. Alright? And so I'm just going to keep doing that all the way across. When I get to this away knot, I'm going to stop and snip it off. And I'm going to make sure it's covered by these other stitches. And if it's not, then we'll do something different. It may or may not get covered. So we'll worry about that when we get to it. Maybe probably should have with this one done an away knot. So we would have started somewhere else and then wove it under. Or a pin stitch. And I'll show you how to do a pin stitch next. Okay. So I'm going to travel again. And get back to where I want to start. And I'm going to do these consistently going in the same direction because I don't want to get it messed up in my head. And sometimes just being consistent will keep you in good graces with the stitching gods. So, okay. So that one goes over 2 threads right between those 2. You come out a thread because this one's going to be 4 threads wide. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Come out of the thread here. It should line you back up and skip or stitch over 6 threads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 threads. Remember, you've got 3 in the middle. They're all the same length. So that was the first one, the second one, and the third one. Okay. Now, the next one is just 4 threads wide. So I came in a thread, and I'm going to count 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, the last one is just 2 threads wide. So I'm going to come in a thread, and I'm going to count 2. Okay? All right. So now, do what I did before. Travel up to the top. Run myself underneath. Okay. Okay. We ready again. Now this time we're going to run into this away knot, and we're going to have to snip it off. So the second stitch is 4 threads wide. Third stitch is 6 threads wide. Okay. Remember, this one is the same. Okay, now I'm going to snip this knot off when my thread is on top and it's taut. So I don't have anything hanging back there. And I am going to go ahead and snip that off because I want to make sure that, you know, we don't have any worries back there. Okay. So he's in there pretty good. I'm going to leave him and I'm going to stitch over him a little bit more. All right. That was the second leg that was 6 stitches long. This is the third one that's 6 stitches long. And then you come down, you come in 1 thread because this one's just 4 wide. And then the last leg of this Hungarian is just 2 threads wide. Okay. So I'm going to carry on and I will talk to you when I get over to this edge. Okay, so we are on the last stitch of this band. Now, you've got a choice. You can leave this space empty, or you can just do partial stitches and do compensating. I want to show you how to do partial stitches. So, I've already I have not woven up there. I'm going to weave up there and get back to my starting point, same way as the other times. Okay, so now, no matter how wide your banding is, you can do this and, make a full section. So remember, we just want one thread as a margin, right? So on this first stitch, it works. It's 2 threads over, and you're going to go down, and that leaves you 1 thread there, okay? Then you're going to come over here and come out 1 thread. Normally you would go over here. Well, you're not going to, because you want that 1 thread margin. So on this last stitch, it's called a compensating stitch. And you're just going to end it wherever it ends. And so that first stitch that we made has 1 thread margin till you get to the border of the banding. And that we're going to stop there all the way down. We're going to do the left side just like it should be. We're going to come out 1 thread, on the next stitch, but we're going to end right there. Now, this is the thread that would have been over the stitch that would have been over 6 threads. We're going to start these 3 in the middle in the same spot, just like we usually would, but we're going to end it in the same spot too, on that margin, because we don't want to go beyond that. Okay? Now, you come in 1 thread, right, just like you've done all along, but you're just going to be ending it there. And then your last stitch is actually over 2 threads, just like your first one was. Okay? So, that's called a compensating stitch. And you can see that it's not complete, but it is consistent. And you've got 1 thread margin on both sides of that widest band. And that's what we wanted. So, we didn't do it on the first band because we wanted it to look like it had a beginning. And so we kind of let those be on the inside. But we could have taken that first band all the way over too and filled it up. And if you were actually filling in a space, you would. So you would have, filled in all those spaces. You would have made compensating stitches on both sides of even that first band and taken it over. But I felt like it was important for you to see the full Hungarian stitch and see how it looked. And so those are your first 2 bands. I'm going to end my thread and run it under, and I'm going to start with a different color again for the 3rd band, and we'll work that one in, and then you'll get to see how these little boxes in the middle are created. Okay, so I'll be right back. Okay, so now we're going to start with the 3rd band, and we want to start, it's basically going to be right underneath this, and so you're going to come to this bottom leg of your first stitch on your 2nd band, and you want to start there. And I always like to go, when possible, from a hole that doesn't have thread in it into one that does versus the other way. Some people will say clean to dirty in needlepoint, and so this hole is clean. It doesn't have any threads in it. This hole isn't dirty, but it does have a thread in it, but that's kind of a nomenclature terminology people will use, including myself. So I am going to start 2 threads down from that little leg and count up 1, 2 threads, and it should put me right back there, and it did. Okay? Alright, and that's how we're going to carry on, and we're going to do it the same as we did that very first band, and it's going to count the same way as all the others have counted. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4 threads. And the next one's going to go over 6 threads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. And remember, these next 2 legs are the same length as that one we just did. They're all over 6 threads. You can count them if you need to. If you can see the pattern, you can do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's going to end you right there with that leg on that other Hungarian. Okay. Then you're going to come in 1 thread. And you're going to go over 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. And then the last thread, the last leg of the stitch is over 2 threads. So you come in 1 thread, count up 2, and you go down, and it should line you up with that little band that was right above it. Okay? So that is the first stitch, first Hungarian stitch on your 3rd band. Now you see you've made a little space. And that's a space where you can do a bead, or you can do a French knot. And we are going to travel along and do this whole little band. I'm just going to skip the 2 threads, and again, I'm going to start down here because I like to go clean to dirty. But if it's easier for you to go the other way and, you know, not pull that thread, you can do that. That's why people go clean to dirty using that terminology, is so that you're not picking the stitch that's already there. You're not splitting that thread, right? And so, you know, by now you might be able to see the pattern, but you're still on the 3rd stitch in, you're covering 6 threads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, and then you come in a thread. So I'm going to finish this band out just like I did the very first of these 3 bands. And I'll come back to you when I get to the end. Okay, so I'm on the last Hungarian stitch, and like me, I think all of you will have a choice as to whether you do some compensating or you end it with a little bit of space. So That's that. If you did a compensating stitch, it would just be right here. It'd just be one little two-legged stitch. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave that. So essentially in this 3-band Hungarian, just this second band had a compensating stitch. And these are all full stitches. And so that's your 3 bands. And I'm going to end it there. Now, if you continue on and do more of this Hungarian stitch, if you're on this 21 count and you've only got a 1 yard cut, you're probably going to run out of room, especially if you do the beginning the beginning motif and the ending signature motif. So, it's up to you. You can always attach another piece of banding to it if you want. It's going to get pretty long on this 21 count. On the 28 count, you might have room. But, at this point, you've probably figured out this Hungarian stitch. And I know it's fun, and I know you want to do more of it. So, you may really enjoy these kinds of stitches. I definitely do. And I could do lots of these. But I'm going to end this one here, and I would encourage you, if you want to have an opening motif and a closing motif, that you make sure you have enough room for that and to wrap it on a spool, that you probably stick to, your three bands on this one. Some of them you'll have 6, but this one you've got 3. Now, I am going to end this thread, and I'm going to come back over here, and I'm going to start this again, and I'm going to show you how to do this little section in one, so that you're not doing a band across and a band back. Like if you were really trying to fill in an area, then you would actually have like a full section of stitches. So I'm going to end the thread and I will come back to you. Okay, so I want to show you now how to do the Hungarian stitch in like a little section. If you wanted to fill something in. So you would, you want to have your 1 thread margin. So you would come here, and then just like we started before, you would count over 4 threads. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're going to start with the vertical. You'll start by a vertical stitch, but you're going to start on the vertical Hungarian. So it's the same. If you remember before, the first leg is over 2 threads. The second leg is over 4 threads, and you're just coming out 1 thread on each side. The next leg is over 6 threads. And you have 3 legs over 6 threads. So you've got to make 2 more after this one. So that's your first one. And then you've got the next 2, those are both over 6 threads. Then you drop back a thread on each side to get over 4 threads, and you can count these. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the last leg is over 2 threads. Just like that. So that's one Hungarian stitch. Now I'm going to start the other coming the other direction. And in Jeanette's book, you'll notice that she talks about doing these stitches on a diagonal. And that's exactly what this would be. So I came over 2 threads and came back to where my last one ended. And on this particular Hungarian stitch, I'm going to be going in that direction. So the second leg is 4 threads. 1, 2, 3, 4. The third leg is 6 threads. So you're coming out 1 thread on each side. And then the next 2 legs are the same. They're both over 6 threads. So you have 3 in the belly that are over 6 threads. You're going to drop back a thread, and the next one's over 4 threads. And the next one's over 2 threads. So that's your second Hungarian finished, right? So let's go ahead and do another one coming down this way. Let's just stay on this diagonal for a minute. So the first stitch is over 2 threads, joins up to that one. Second stitch is over 4 threads, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a good idea to count them every once in a while. Make sure you're still on track. You can get going on a pattern and find out you were on the wrong pattern. So always good to double check. The 3 belly stitches are all the same length over 6 threads. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then the last 2 stitches, you're dropping in a thread on each side. So that one's over 4. This one's over 2. Going to do another one. It's very relaxing, very kind of methodical, meditative, I guess. That's the word I wanted. You can see what a pretty pattern this starts to make. It's a trick on your eyes, kind of. You think that, you know, when we did them before and we did them all in a straight line, they had a certain look to them, and we did them in different colors so that they intentionally stood out. But when you put them together, you can see that it starts to take your eyes toward a different pattern. So that stitch was over 4. The next one's going to be over 2. So you're coming in a thread to finish this one off. All right. So that looked good. Now I'm going to start coming the other direction. So I'm going to take my diagonal back up. So I'm going to start underneath this one and count up 2 threads. I counted out 2 to do it. And you will notice that I like to go from a clean hole to a hole that already has thread in it, a dirty hole. You can't always do that, and it's not dirty because the linen's not dirty, but it's just a way to say it. And it's that terminology is used in needlepoint a lot. And remember, these stitches aren't just, you know, specialty stitches for cross stitch or just for needlepoint. You know, embroidery stitches go across the embroidery disciplines. So when you learn them here, you can apply them anywhere. So those 3 belly stitches were all the same length. They were all 6 threads. This one is 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the next one is 2. Okay, and you can start to see the little pattern form, right? You can see the little space in the middle start to form. So that one's over 6. The next 2 are also going to be over 6. Now you have that little box in the middle. And then you come in a thread. This one's over 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And the next one is over 2. And that makes a different kind of box, right? And of course, I'm going to come up and I'm going to start right here. That one's over 2. This one's over 4. Now, I'm not coming out of a clean hole on this one, but that's okay. I'm just being careful not to damage that thread. This one's over 6. I'm going to count it because I was about to lose my place there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's why you count it. You saw me looking at it. I was thinking about it. That would have been wrong. You can get yourself confused here. You need 3 that length. So that was the first one. 2, 3. Right? And then you come in a thread, and that one goes over 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The last one goes over 2. Come in a thread, and it's over 2. Right? Now I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to do this one And I'm going to go clean to dirty again because it's just easier. That one goes over 2 threads. This next one goes over 4 threads. 1, 2, 3, 4. The next one goes over 6 threads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It joins right back up where it should be. You've got 3 that are that length. You will notice here that we are exactly where we wanted to be with the edge of the stitch. You've got a 1 thread margin. That's what we wanted. That doesn't always happen, but we're happy when it does work. So you need 3 that are over 6 threads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's your third one. You can hear the siren out there. That's Small Town Americana. That was going the other direction. They're usually going the other way. This one's over 4 threads. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then this last one is over 2 threads. Okay. So there you have it. Pretty little design there. That's how you can use this to create a filling stitch. You're basically, filling in a particular area. Now, we're going to come back and we're going to put some beads in these open spots and maybe a French knot. I like French knots. I'm not a fan really of colonial knots, and there's 2 camps on that. People are either colonial knot people or they are French knot people. And I tend to be a French knot person. So I will show you that, and then you can see how this finishes up. So this is another way to use this stitch. It's really pretty like that. You can see it makes different patterns. And depending on where you stopped and started these stitches, these are all full Hungarians in here too. There's no compensating. Those are all full Hungarians. You can find them all in there. Depending on where you stop and start and how you angled it, you've got a really different look to that pattern. So I hope you enjoy it. We'll be back to do the next part. Okay, so this is our finished, finished. It's several different Hungarian stitches that are, finished. So here's one, here's one, here's one, here's one. You can see they're in there. They just look different, right, when you do it this way. So I wanted to show you first how to do a French knot. And this is a pretty good size. Actually, I'm going to do the French knot up here. So this is a smaller space and it'll probably sit better up here. Okay. So to do a French knot, there's a couple different variations, but you want to hold this kind of taut, and you hold it in your non-dominant hand. You bring your needle hand over, you come up underneath that thread, and you wrap it around that thread twice, really just twice. And then you go back down through the fabric. You kind of want to go on a thread beside the one that you came up. Not necessarily, don't really go back into the exact same hole. And you kind of have to keep it just a little bit loose till you get it really almost in there, and then there you go. So, and this is flower thread, so it's a pretty good size French knot. And French knots don't always look uniform, so for that reason, some people like colonial knots better, but that one's fine. Another alternative is to lay a bead. And you don't have to put anything in the middle of these. I thought they looked pretty cool with nothing in the middle. But you could put a bead. So I have a few beads here to choose from. I'm going to choose this one. So I don't know if this needle will go through this bead. I didn't really test that. We'll see. It does. Alright, so to lay a bead, you kind of do a cross stitch. So you come up in one corner, and this is a big fat bead because this is a big fat space. And you make the first leg of your cross stitch, and now your bead is there. You could leave it like that, but if you really want that bead to be secure, you'll come up, you'll go through the belly of the bead on the second leg of the cross stitch and go down up here. Alright, so now you've got that bead laid, and that's pretty. I like that. So I'm going to put another one over here. And these are all kind of different colors. So I'm going to choose this one maybe. So again, you make the first leg of your cross stitch. Okay. You could leave it, but I don't. Most people if you really want the bead to stay on and to all be uniform. That's the other thing. If you don't put the second leg through there, they don't stand up like that straight. They lean one way or the other. You come through the belly of the bead and you go back down to where you would end your cross stitch, just like that. Okay. And if you felt like this little French knot was just too sparse, you could add another one. And that one's kind of leaning because this is a really big, low count linen. And so it's a pretty good space between the threads. And I went down to the left of my last one. On this one, I can go down to the right. It'll kind of fill up that little spot. And, I could put 2 more in there if I wanted to, but I think that's fine. So you can put something in the middle of your boxes or you cannot, and that's totally up to you. And that is what you might do with a Hungarian stitch. So I hope you've enjoyed your first specialty stitch with this Learning Stitches program, and I hope you use it and find some joy in doing them. And if you have any questions, please feel free to send me an email. Thanks a lot. I hope you have a good week, and I hope you've enjoyed this. Bye.